Welcome to Art with Kasey. I'm Kasey, and I'm going to show you how to draw this bird. I'm going to show you how to draw the basic structure of the bird, and then I'm going to add some pattern. You can do different patterns than I'm doing if you want, but we're going to start with this bird wing. We are going to come down and simply make this little teardrop shape. Teardrop, water droplet, whatever you think. After that, we're going to make a U underneath it. So we're going to make it's kind of a big smile underneath it. And then we can close off this part of the tail. And for this bird's head, we're going to take this, come up and down to a little point, and then we'll bring our bird's head around and connect right at the beak. Now, because it's easier for me to turn my paper, I'm going to turn it upside down. And for these tail feathers, I'm going to come out from the tail and flare out just a little bit. And then I'll connect that one. So there's 1, 2, and then we've got room for a couple more in here. So you can fit them however it works best for you. So we are just making these long, it's like a rectangle, but it flares out at the bottom just a little bit. So there's the basic parts of our bird, and we can start filling them in with pattern now. What patterns you choose are completely up to you. The first thing I'm going to do is give my bird an eye. I'm also thinking that in these feathers, and I'm going to turn it upside down so that I don't have to. Let me focus on the tail. Turning it upside down so I'm not resting my hand on. And in each of these little sections, I'm gonna divide them in half. So I'm gonna split each one in half. And it gets a little confusing, but it won't be for long. And then I'm gonna make this feather pattern in each of the tail feathers. So I'm doing my diagonals that way, and then in the other half of the feather, I will come up this way. So that is our basic feather pattern, and you can do that in each one of those. So then I'll zoom back out, flip that bird back over, and then we can start working on another section. I know that when I see a bird's feather like this, sometimes they come down this way. So I'm going to add these little sections, and then I can make a pattern in each one of those. I also know that I can have a little beak. So there's my bird's beak. And then we can really do whatever we want here on the bottom section of the bird. And I'm just going to come up right to where I had that U. And I'm going to make sure that my bird has a place for me to stop for these patterns. So I'm trying not to start a line somewhere that I already have a line. I'm trying to choose places where there isn't already a line. So like right here. And I'm simply coming around and back up. And then we come to a point where we have to go behind this wing. So there we are. We've got a lot of lines. We're ready to go. I'm going to turn sideways and give my bird a little decorative piece on its neck. And for this one, I think I want to do scallops. So I'm going to do this pattern here. And we can always add to this pattern later, should we decide to do that. All right, so now we can think, are we going to put something in these little sections? And I think for this section here, I'm going to go point to point with my lines. And I can overlap a little bit if I want to. I'm just going to go point to point. So there is that pattern, and I can always do some other things in these in-between spaces if I choose to later. That's my pattern for there. And because this was an up and down pattern, I think next to it, I'm going to make something that is a little more horizontal. So let's do horizontal lines, and I'll put something inside these sections, of course. But this just gives you an idea of how you can alternate those patterns. Give yourself a chance to do more things. So that one is kind of a very simple stripe. So now let's do something again that is kind of an up and down. So I think for this one, I'm going to do leaves. So there is one set of leaves, and then I'll come up and we'll have another set of leaves. And we could also make this a flower if we want to. I'm going to go with leaves. I'm coming up out of each one, and I'm making this a set of leaves. So you can see how that's going. Coming up, making a set of leaves, doing my best to get them to fit in there. So that's an up and down. And now on this one, we can do something that is side to side. We can do something diagonal. We could do something round. We have a lot of options. I think what I'm going to do is some circles. And we can connect these circles later if we decide to. But for now, they're just going to be circles in the space of this feather section. And if you need to turn that paper, don't be shy. Do whatever works best for your hand so that your hand and your brain can do their thing together to make this pattern. And my last little circle is going to fit in there. All right. Now we have all of these little sections that we can start thinking about a pattern for. And because I ended this section with round circles, I think this part that butts up next to it is going to need to be something that's more straight, more something that is not a round element. So let's see. How about if we just do radiating lines, but these lines, as we turn the corners, are going to go outward. So it's not right next to these lines, so that's good. And then we'll keep going this way, and we'll follow that same pattern. And I don't think it matters how much space you put between each thing. They can be irregularly spaced. They can be spaced exactly the same. I feel like if there's a bit of irregularity to it, it's more fun. All right, so I've got stripes and stripes. So on this section, I need to think of something that is not stripes. Since we have circles here, I also sort of don't want it to be circles. However, I can't think of something else right now. So I'm going to go with tiny circles. So this section is just going to have tiny circles in it. Sometimes I have a lot of creativity and I can think of all these different patterns and it's great. Sometimes I just go back to another size of circles, and that's okay. Still a challenge for my brain. So that section is the same as this section over here. So I'm going to go into this section and do those same little tiny circles. And I think it's going to be okay that I have circles next to circles because they're different. I'm just enjoying the practice of drawing all of these tiny circles. And maybe they're sort of in a polka dot pattern, or maybe they're not. What I think is later, this will become a different pattern and not just circles. But for now, we'll work just circles. And then later we can go back in and add more creativity. So now I'm turning my bird back around. And we did circles, stripes. So in this section, how about if we do a wavy line? So there's our wavy line. And then we can think of something else to do in here. What do we want to do? I have wavy. I'm going to come up here and draw on the head a little bit. So I'm going to put a nice little boundary for the collar. And then maybe I'll leave the head open. And I'm not going to do a lot to it right now. Let's see, what can we do in the bottom? We can do zigzags. We haven't done a zigzag yet. So I'm going to just do very large zigzags. And then in each of these triangles I create, I can do something else if I want to. All right, so we've got most of our patterns down, and now we can go into each of these and you can just use your black marker, or you can get something more colorful and fill in all of these different sections with more pattern. So for instance, we can go into these little sections here and do something like tiny lines. And I can go every other one, I can put more tiny lines. And so on and so forth until I get to the top. So I'm going to add some extra pattern to this, but I'm going to go into time lapse. Now that I have all of these sections and I have some basic pattern, I can go in and add detail to each of those patterns. And you can stop whenever you're happy. You can take breaks and go back to it. But I like to simply think of different ways to use lines and circles, dashes, scallops, very simple shapes in repetition. to make the patterns more interesting. So even though I just had those stripes there, I went and added more stripes to the stripes. And I had these zigzags, but I added some scallops inside of them. You can alternate what you color in, what you leave uncolored, and sometimes I need a piece of paper under my hand so that I'm not smudging the marker that's already on the page. I even went with some little heart shapes in this one because I was getting tired of the simpler shapes. I'm just thinking of a new thing to do to each of my little shapes in each of these different sections. I kind of make up a simple little rule and then finish out that pattern. When I was done for the evening, this is what it looked like when I stopped. I still wasn't completely finished though. I came back this morning and added more pattern and really finished off the bird using my same little stripes, big stripes, coloring in some of the shapes to give them more interest. And when I looked at different parts of the bird and thought, there's just not enough colored in here, I would make up a new way to color it in. I'm very happy with the way the tail feathers turned out. I didn't go in a perfect pattern. I skipped a few sections each time and just put the darker color where I thought it should go. I gave the bird a cute little cheek and some scallops, and then I made a section that goes around its eye and its cheek. It started to look sort of like a puffin. And then within that section, I split it in half and did the tiny dots on the upper half. And I tried some stripes, but I didn't love them, so I just decided to color in that section and make it solid black. And then I colored in some of those scallops around this little bird noggin. And this is where I decided to stop today. Now, this doesn't mean I'm completely done with my bird, but I'm done for now. What I love about these kind of projects is you can always come back to them. You can add more pattern, more color, whatever you'd like. Just enjoy the simple act of this repetitive pattern drawing and let your mind take a bit of a rest.